Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
You were briefed yesterday along with your colleagues. Did you walk away satisfied with the game plan moving forward here?
It was a classified hearing, so I can't tell you what was said in there, but I can tell you there was an ovation, and over on the House side, there was a standing ovation. So I think across parties, across both houses, there was an overwhelming sense of gratitude, first of all, for our troops and those who planned this mission, and for President Trump for his boldness. But we're very excited. You know, a lot of our questions were about the road ahead, but we're also very thankful for his boldness and decisive action with Venezuela.
Welcome back to Training Tuesday. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. Well, it seems North Carolina is at the center of a storm of activity in our country these days. That was U.S. Senator Ted Budd talking about the Venezuela Special Operations effort that was so successful. Those Special Operations forces that so professionally completed the Venezuela op to capture its illegitimate and narco-terror cartel leader make their home there in North Carolina, of course. The state continues to focus on how disaster recovery operations need to improve after the lackluster performance in the Hurricane Elena response and recovery in the western part of the state. A pro-ISIS terrorist attack was prevented just before the new year, and now we find that the state has issued illegal commercial driver's licenses at a very high rate. Coupled with recent anti-ICE protests and the discovery of potentially vast fraud operations and nationally highlighted violent crimes in the state, things are not slowing down. Well, my guest today is Adam Smith, the founder and CEO of Savage Freedoms. He's been with us before. He's a family man, U.S. Army Green Beret veteran, and he's running for Congress in North Carolina's 11th District to address the issues the establishment politicians don't have the stomach for. Adam, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Welcome back to the United States. It's good to be here,
said
Rob.
United States, yeah.
It's good to see you again, sir. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you? Although it's cold down here on the Gulf Coast right now, here in Mississippi, and I'm not very pleased about that. But, you know, things are what they are.
Yeah, it's a running trend right now across most of the eastern seaboard. You hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of conversations that establishment, conservative establishment, are failing to address directly. There's a huge national security issue. There's a huge issue with regards to illegal aliens, illegal migrants moving throughout the entirety of the United States. There's a huge issue with massive amounts of fraud taking place. And, you know, this operation that just took place in Venezuela, we've seen a large amount of protests and Democrat leadership over and over again outright saying how this was unconstitutional, how it was illegal. I think people have to remember that Congress gave the power to the president and the authority to the president back in the 70s through the War Powers Resolution to authorize the president to take limited military action in the best interest of the American people. He has a 48-hour window to make certain that he informs Congress in the Gang of Eight, and then he has 60 days for Congress to either pass an authorization of use of military force in AUMF or to declare war. But the last time we declared war was in World War II. Now, what I don't understand is why, of the 29,000 bombs that were dropped under Obama's administration, and I think 7 or 8 different countries, there was never a conversation about unconstitutionality or illegality when it came to those actions. And the fact of the matter is that it all comes down to one thing. If Trump makes a decision, no matter if it's curing cancer, it's going to be demonized and it's going to be hated. And look at the cheering and celebration that we got from the Venezuelan people. So many Venezuelans who have come to the United States to try and escape the violence there. have all gone out and cheered for this action in order to depose a tyrannical leader that runs narco terror operations. I think I think it speaks a lot for that decision in limited military use of force.
Yeah, on the Venezuelans themselves, Adam, I remember when Maduro first took over, it had already started, but you started seeing videos of citizens literally digging through trash cans and killing rats because they had the inflation had destroyed their currency. They'd lost their jobs because the government nationalized all kinds of industries like the United States oil companies that were all down there. The president just had the CEOs of those folks, a lot of those folks in a meeting this past week to talk about how they're going to go back in now and rebuild the infrastructure so that they can take over their property again and get at least recover some of the revenues. They won't get it all. I mean, one of the company's CEOs said they had lost at least $12 billion in just the shutdown part of it when the company was nationalized. But the Venezuelan people is what this is all about. And many of them worked in those with oil companies as their employees. And once they nationalized everything, they essentially destroyed it because they're communist and they don't know how to make wealth.
Well, the other piece of this, too, is that you've got a nation run by narco-terrorist leadership that believes in communist and Marxist principles, that's having mass execution, mass arrests, and are aligning themselves with U.S. adversaries. They're meeting with Iran leadership. They're meeting with Iranian leadership, Chinese leadership, Cuban leadership. I have no doubt they're in communications with North Korea. How is it that people, especially on the left and especially Democrat leadership, under Obama, this is a non-issue. We can bomb everybody under Obama because Obama is the greatest thing since sliced bread. However, with that being said, when these operations are taking place in our backyard and we don't have the ability to project geopolitical and strategic military power throughout our hemisphere because we are the global superpower in this hemisphere, and we allow a nation so rich in resources that definitively wants to see the downfall of the United States and its people aligning with our adversaries, how is it not a strategic move in order to depose that leader illegally put into position and secure a proper alliance with a sound and duly elected government? I don't understand what the disconnect is here.
It's Donald Trump. That's the disconnect. I'm assuming that you would be on the floor of Congress calling out your colleagues, both on the left and right, that are saying, hey, the president should have asked permission. We're going to pass this war powers resolution, et cetera, et cetera. Because you're right. I mean,
if the Congress doesn't like it, then change the legislation. If Congress doesn't like it, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. If you don't like a bill that was passed in the 70s, write a new one. Get it past the proper procedures. Don't go back and say that this is unconstitutional when Congress in the 70s chose to make it constitutional. And the Supreme Court's upheld it, and upheld it for a multitude of presidents. So if Congress doesn't like it, change it. If the American people are supporting this particular action because they know it's in the best interest of the American people and the Venezuelan people for that matter, then maybe they should listen to their constituents.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In the Obama and George Bush years, the authorizations to use military force were always looked at when they did these kinds of strikes and said, hey, these are the authorizations Congress passed. And there was an attempt to repeal them in the Biden administration, and it failed dramatically. And it still hasn't been repealed. So, as I said during the first Trump administration, when he killed Soleimani in a righteous operation again on behalf of the people of the United States and the people of Iran, too, really, and peaceful, loving people everywhere in the Middle East. But when he did that, he had full authorization under these two AUMFs. And this, now that the narco cartels, the narco terrorist cartels, have been declared international terrorist organizations, he still has full authorization under the AUMF, regardless of whether this was a law enforcement operation or not, doesn't he?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the 2001 AUMF that was passed right after 9/11 specifically gave authorization to limited use of military force against any terror organizations defined as terror organizations by the United States president. Now that you're right, they attempted to try and repeal that particular act down the road, and this wasn't too long ago. However, it failed, and it failed in dramatic fashion. They did, however, repeal the 2002 AMF that was authorization for use of military force in Iraq. Okay, so be it. I mean, that's no longer a primary target when it comes to our ability to project U.S. power and ultimately try and secure regions. But when it comes to the operation in Venezuela or in general operations against terrorism in the world, it's still authorized under the 2001 legislation.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, let's give us an update on your political campaign and how it's going. You're challenging the incumbent Republican in North Carolina. What's going on?
Well, that's a good question. There's a recent poll out, which is very interesting. And the recent poll is that the leading Democrat candidate is leading in a head-to-head against the incumbent. And they're leading head-to-head against the incumbent by 1 point. And when it comes to offering biographical information and people understanding history, he's actually leading by 5 points. The Democrat Party is leaning heavily into North Carolina's 11th district because they want to flip this seat. This is one of the biggest targets on their map, and they want to flip this seat. And this seat is at risk of being flipped. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've got, in general, an incumbent that's in position that doesn't have the most sound voting record. In his first term under Biden, a lot of his votes were very wishy-washy, kind of by the fly of the night. Whoever's in power, that's who we're going to vote for. So voting records weren't solid. Our campaign, man, talk about an experience. This is maybe one of the hardest job interviews I've ever done, Rob. And I think it's actually been pretty spectacular. I've had a chance to peek behind the curtain. And I can tell you this, the American people don't truly understand what we're facing when it comes to modern politics and modern party politics. And what we're facing is this. The number one question that I'm asked every single time I speak to somebody in politics is, how much money have you raised? It's not a conversation of policy position. It's not a merit of the message. It comes down to how much money can we feed the machine. I know that you've experienced the same thing, and I've had this conversation with a multitude of other candidates, and they've experienced the same thing. I find it very interesting. And with that being said, we have momentum. We have a great ground game. We have a huge amount of people that are supporting the effort and supporting the endeavor. We're getting ready to start phone banking operations here in the next week or so, and early voting kicks off in just under 30 days. So we're going to see this thing through to the very end. I think we have a very, very, very good chance of winning against the incumbent.
Yeah, I mean, look, up here in Mississippi a few years ago, we had an unknown military guy challenge incumbent Michael Guest and forced him to go to a runoff. And had it not been for some major mistakes by him in the runoff from a campaign perspective, he had a really good shot at winning that. But the other thing that happened was Kevin McCarthy and the boys at the NRCC came in with over $1 million and got a bunch of Democrats to come vote for their Republican incumbent, because apparently the Republican power brokers continue to still prefer having Democrats put their people in office rather than their own base. Is that what you're seeing in North Carolina too?
Well, I haven't seen that firsthand, but what I have seen is I have seen a disillusionment of most Republican voters. There's a lot of frustration right now in general with the Republican Party. They're not seeing the Doge cuts being codified. They're not seeing Trump's executive orders being codified. They're not seeing people be brought to justice with regards to massive amounts of fraud and corruption in the federal government. So there's a lot of disillusionment right now with Republican voters, at least in all the conversations that I've had. And on top of that, they're very, very sick of politics as usual. They're tired of hearing lip service. They're tired of people pandering to them in order to get their vote and then going and doing whatever they choose to do. The United States, I think the U.S. voter, especially the conservative voter, are truly ready to bring constitutional, conservative, and constitutional originalism back into the forefront of civic-minded people. And I think they are looking for someone to lead them back to the concepts that great patriots built this country upon. Our founding fathers spoke to the idea of party power. They spoke to the idea of fractions amongst the people. They spoke to the idea of money manipulating the ability to create, to limit the voice or the message. And right now we're seeing that. We watch that across the country. Incumbents have a 95% chance of winning across the country on average. And candidates that are stepping into space, they have to double down on the ability to not just raise money, but more importantly, create a true and legitimate buzz.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You've got to be able to capture that base in spite of all the millions of dollars that are inevitably going to be spent against you to prevent you from taking an incumbent down. Well, we got to take a break, Adam. When we come back, we'll see a little clip about the ISIS potential ISIS attack that was averted in North Carolina just before New Year's, and we'll continue this discussion because I want to get into it about how the recovery of Western North Carolina is going. What's the impact of having 25,000 Afghan refugees inside the state, according to independent journalists reporting that's going on, and those kinds of things. We'll be right back with Adam Smith, congressional candidate for North Carolina's 11th district. He can win, folks, but if you help him.
North Carolina teen Christian Sturdivant pledged his allegiance to ISIS at just 14 years old. Christian, a now 18-year-old, planned to use knives and hammers to attack people at a grocery store and restaurant on New Year's Eve in Mint Hill, North Carolina, a suburban town in my district. Thank the Lord that his plan was intercepted and thwarted by the FBI and United States Attorney Russ Ferguson, with the help of Mint Hill law enforcement and the mayor of Mint Hill, Del Dalton. And as a result of their work, they were able to stop Christian before he could act. But this foiled attack should concern us all. An impressionable American teenager was influenced by violent Islamist ideology. Let me be clear. Radical Islam is not just a danger in places like Mamdani's New York. It is in my home state and is quickly spreading across the United States. Imagine almost losing your life on New Year's Eve just for celebrating in America. That's what almost happened in my district. This is a type of hate radical Islam inspires. It has no place in America. We must do more to push back and stand up to hateful ideologies that espouse violence against innocent people.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and my guest today is from Western North Carolina in their Congressional District 11. He's a candidate challenging the Republican incumbent there, really essentially because what this man saw and was needed to do to help his fellow citizens in the response to Hurricane Elena. Adam Smith is my guest. He's a retired Special Operations Forces veteran. And Adam, have to go into this a little bit because I saw some independent reporting that says there's 25,000 of the 78,000 or so Afghan refugees, most of which are totally unvetted during the Biden administration and the debacle of the withdrawal, that are inside North Carolina. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to know that there's that high level of population of them. But something I think that's this is something that's really frustrated me, and I've thought a lot about it. For nearly 20 years of my adult life, we were at war. almost my entire adult life, we were at war. We were at war in Afghanistan. We were at war in Iraq. We're doing counter-terror operations all over the world, counter-narco-terror operations in Central South America. We're conducting these operations, and the bill of goods that I got sold when we were doing these operations is that everything that we did was to keep them out of our borders, to keep them out of our country. If we fought them there, they wouldn't come here. And then under 4 years of Biden, we opened the floodgates. And in those floodgates, we allowed millions of illegals and many of them with ill intent to come into the United States. Now, everybody is in protesting right now with regards to ICE, which has happened in Minnesota. Everybody's protesting, and I say everybody, the left is protesting ICE. They are protesting what happened in Minnesota. They think that immigration and migration and open borders is the way that we maintain apparently sovereign security in our country. But the fact of the matter is that with open borders, with a porous border, not only do we not have national security, we don't have national sovereignty. And we increase our risk for terror attack within the United States. On top of that, we increase opportunities to radicalize our youth. We're seeing a huge uptick with fraud and money laundering happening in places like Minneapolis, Minnesota. A huge Somali population and community up there has corruptly stolen millions of dollars of the taxpayers' money. And a lot of that got sent overseas. And what is it funding? Well, I would assume that when we move massive amounts of money overseas, just like President Obama did, and he sent billions of dollars to Iran, we saw a definitive uptick in sectarian and insurgent violence because Iran's surrogates got paid millions of dollars in order to attack American lives, American soldiers in Iraq and other places in the world. We have to assume the same thing is happening here. And now we have actual proof that it's happening here. And we've seen this multiple times. So now we have an 18-year-old who's been radicalized, who assumes and believes that ISIS is the only way to do it and that a Islamic caliphate is destined for the American future. And if the American people in general don't wake up and the United States government doesn't continue to take massive action against this threat, I think we're going to see an uptick in radicalized violence in the United States. And I think it's very possible we'll see an uptick like we haven't seen before, especially with the amount of money that's getting poured into ICE protests, Antifa organizations, rioting, direct violence against law enforcement. And it seems that Democrat leadership continues to promote this to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the incitement language that the Democrat leadership uses it tends to seems to me to ratchet up, and they double and triple down when one of these incidents happens. We'll talk about the protests that are going on, the anti-ICE protests going on in the last segment specifically. But from your perspective, you are a special operations U.S. Army veteran, and take, for instance, this network, the terrorism network, the Islamist terrorism networks itself. You specialize in that kind of thing. Do you think that we're on the verge of some type of Islamist insurgency inside the country because of this high numbers of refugees that have come in? Or
yeah, we're beyond on the verge. There's a definitive insurgency taking place. I mean, ultimately, when we look at insurgency, what are we looking at? We're looking at an attempt to overthrow the societal standard and community norms that the foundational principles of a country or nation was built upon. And we're seeing that happen all over the United States. In fact, there was just a law passed in Texas in order to thwart the efforts of Islamic communities from passing Sharia law or conducting Sharia courts in their community. I mean, if that's not an insurgent effort to thwart the standard by which we operate and constitutional norms by which we operate in this country, I don't know what is. If we look at the amount of fraud and corruption that's taken place in Islamic communities, specifically Somali communities and others throughout the nation, and look, people are going to watch this and they're going to say, how dare you demonize an entire people? This is not about demonizing an entire people. This is about talking facts. And facts are, there is a regular piece of communication that comes out from a multitude of imams throughout the United States that preaches hate against the United States, that preaches hate against Christianity, that preaches hate against Judaism. There's a huge amount of language coming out from Islamic communities, especially the Somali communities, that want to defraud the American people and steal taxpayers' dollars. In fact, they all said that they came here in order for them to take over Minnesota. Minnesota is their land and they should own it. We see an uptick in an attempt to create Sharia courts throughout the United States. If you want to be an American, be an American. Conform and assimilate to the founding principles this nation was built upon. Don't attempt to change the rules and the laws in order to fit the standard that you want based on your life outside of this country. You come here to be a part of a nation. You don't come here to pick apart a nation. And that's what we're seeing happening. And I got to tell you, I'm kind of sick and tired of politicians not speaking directly to this problem because it is an actual and legitimate problem. And I don't understand why we continue to avoid this topic. What, are we afraid that we're going to be canceled? Are these politicians afraid that if they speak against these particular issues, that people are going to come after them? At some point, conservative leaders have to be willing to plant their flag on a hill and die on that hill in order for the betterment of the American people to continue to be moved forward in this world and in this country. And if we don't choose to plant our flag on that hill and we don't choose to die on that hill, then we are abdicating our position and we're saying, you know what, I'm okay with being complicit in any incestuous actions and insidious actions that take place within my nation simply because I want to maintain my seat and I would like to maintain my power. We have to return back to a mentality of statesmen. Speak to the problem, speak direct and plainly to the problem, and then provide solutions to the problem. And if you don't have them, ask the people. Because believe it or not, we the people, we got a lot of solutions to these issues.
Yeah, we do. Unfortunately, though, we brought so many of these folks in from primarily Islamist culture countries that even the elected officials, I mean, this is the 250th year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And Rob Maness's ancestor, named William Maness, was a private in the Continental Army from right there in Robbins, North Carolina, was one of only 5 Scotch-Irishmen to walk out of his county and join Colonel Clark's regiment. But that culture that was passed down through generations in my dad's family down to me, and I've passed it on to my children, is important because it is one of welcoming those to come in to become United States citizens that want to be Americans, but it is also one that's important to carry on that culture that needs to be part of that assimilation, no matter where you come from or what your religion is or what your previous culture was. It's that culture that's got to be assimilated into. And we don't see that happening. We see politicians like Ilhan Omar actually speak against the Declaration of Independence in its 250th year. And no politician that has any power, other than Donald Trump just announced he was thinking about denaturalizing her and deporting her. And he should, in my opinion, because she defrauded the government in her desire to become an American citizen and get naturalized, which is one of the reasons you can do that. But no other politician has stepped up to support that and call this out. And we're in a very dangerous place in this country if we lose the bedrock American culture that started even before the Declaration of Independence, but has been put in place and kept in place by generations of Americans that have welcomed folks here as long as they were willing to assimilate to that culture.
Yeah, I think there's a really good quote from Ronald Reagan. And I'm going to read it verbatim because I don't have it memorized verbatim, so you'll have to forgive me. He said, "Since this is the last speech that I will give as president, I think it's fitting to leave one final thought, an observation about a country which I love. It was stated best in a letter I received not long ago. A man wrote me and said, you can go to live in France, but you cannot become a Frenchman. You can go to live in Germany or Turkey or Japan, but you cannot become a German, a Turk, or Japanese. But anyone from any corner of the earth can come to live in America and become an American." That is the difference in how this country was founded and the mentality that the founding fathers had when they drafted our documents, codifying the gifts endowed to us by God. And if we can understand that mentality, and if the American people would stand up for the foundational principles this nation was built upon, I think there would be a definitive shift in how our politicians are held to account and how the electorate is engaged with not just civic mindedness, but civic education, and how they would also hold to account the amount of fraud and the attempt for people to sort of blaspheme the concept of the Constitution. If people would just take responsibility for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, the Islamists that have come here even become citizens, treat this country the same way the Islamists that went to France, Germany, treat those countries. And all of it is not good for the existence of these great historic civilization cultures that, especially ours, that has lifted more people out of poverty than any government or people in the history of mankind. We'll be right back with Adam Smith, and we'll talk about commercial driver's licenses. There's been a story break in North Carolina about that. I want to get Adam's take on that and what he's going to do as a congressman.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
Of losing nearly $50 million in federal funding if the state doesn't revoke commercial driver's licenses granted to unqualified immigrants. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy writing, quote, North Carolina's failure to follow the rules isn't just shameful, it's dangerous. I'm calling on state leadership to immediately remove these dangerous drivers from our roads and clean up their system. The push comes after the DOT found that of the 50 North Carolina immigrant CDLs they reviewed, 54% of them were issued illegally. Those are your headlines.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and my guest today is congressional candidate for North Carolina's 11th District Republican nomination, Adam Smith, who is a U.S. Army Special Forces veteran and essentially acted as the government, quite frankly, to create a successful recovery and assistance operation after Hurricane Helene that the government entities either refused or were incapable and incompetent, so incompetent they could not or would not establish the right recovery process to help the good people of Western North Carolina, or my own family originates from on my dad's side. Adam, this illegal alien issue, I mean, the CDLs is a major one because we see these drivers killing entire families pretty frequently reported around the country. This is a big country. There's a lot of people on the roads, obviously. But to give commercial driver's licenses to illegal aliens that, I'll be honest with you, the ones that I've run into, most of them can't even speak English. They use the phone as an interpreter if you ever run into any of them. So they can't read the signs. And they're operating these massive vehicles on the highways. And look, I've done a lot of driving in North Carolina, even on the interstates. That is not exactly the safest set of roads in America.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think, you know, I heard when you talk about what Sean said about the state leadership having to take action, I think this is a critical consideration. The federal government should not have the ability to dictate state rights. I mean, it's codified in the Constitution and specifically states that. However, the federal government has the ability to tighten the purse strings. And when we talk about the constant desire for many states to receive federal funding for a multitude of different programs, there has to be some level of leverage or some level of consequence. I think consequence is the word. Consequence to illegal or unjust actions being taken by local state legislators or local state leadership. And when it comes to North Carolina, I think a critical piece we have to look at is we have to change, one, federal regulations and regulatory principles around who gets authorized to receive a federal CDL. That's the first thing. And at the state level, how are we actually going through the process of issuing those driver's license, and who is the approval authority, and why are they approving them? And if we can't pass basic English can't pass basic English English language comprehension tests, then you probably shouldn't get a CDL to be driving commercially in one of the most dangerous jobs in the country, which is driving giant tractor trailers across the United States. You probably shouldn't be getting that. So there has to be a huge change with that process, both in North Carolina, but also across the country. We see this in California. We're seeing it in Washington. We're seeing it in Oregon. We're seeing it in Illinois. So it's not just a North Carolinian problem. This is a national problem.
Yeah, I think the problem generates from the lack of accountability on these states that refuse to enforce federal law in the immigration space initially. And there's been no federal accountability either by the president of the United States federalizing the National Guard and forcing the states to take a specific action, or by holding them accountable by refusing to fund their programs. I mean, every one of these programs, I'm sure, is tied to some federal funding. And even if it's not, it's still the federal government's and the executive branch's responsibility to make sure laws are being executed. The laws are being executed appropriately. I mean, that's in the president's oath of office, to faithfully execute the laws of the United States. And the states are part of that. Even though, the federal government shouldn't be able to force a state to do something that's only within the state's power, we should certainly be able to hold them accountable if they're not enforcing federal laws that apply to everybody across state lines, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about national transit authority, and we really start looking at the ability for national commerce to take place, that leaves sort of the individual state's position and goes into a federal position, because we're talking about federal commerce, national level commerce at that point. So yeah, you're right. There should be a level of consequence in being able to hold these states to account. And also, I think that we need less federal regulation. I think we need less federal government in the lives of everyday people. And I think we need, and everybody says common sense laws. There's no such thing as common sense anymore, Rob. There's absolutely no more common sense in the world. And in the United States, if we could have a return back to sound laws, not driven in special interest, not driven in the ability to just raise dollars for whatever special interest group we're operating for, and to actually do what's in the best interest of the American people, I think we'd see a reduction of illegally issued CDLs and a reduction of funneling money through fraud schemes and corrupt efforts. I mean, if we could do that, then maybe we could actually, reduce national spending. Maybe we could stop passing continuing resolutions that kick the can down the road for increasing the national debt ceiling. Maybe we come up with innovative solutions and have some level of fiduciary responsibility to the American taxpayer and their dollar, rather than continuing to do what we do.
Yeah, you mentioned the Somali fraud in Minneapolis. There are estimates that put that upwards at $18 billion, and about $9 billion of it flows back to the Somalia government, which is obviously run by a bunch of Islamist terrorists. That whole countryside is run by Islamist terrorists. We all know it. So it's funding that. But this fraud is way beyond just Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm not sure if there are any Somali refugees in North Carolina, but there are some in Ohio. I interviewed an Ohio governor's candidate the other day. And the fraud is bigger there, he says, than is in the Minneapolis area. So you're talking double digits more billions of dollars. And then you mentioned the Doge cuts. And Elon Musk thinks there's at least $1.5 trillion a year of fraud, waste, and abuse that Doge should have been able to get out. And just the other day, senators voted not to codify the Doge cuts. Were any of your senators involved in that?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think Senator Ted Budd voted for them, but I'll have to double check on that and see. I do know this. This is something that I'm pretty fired up about. While Western North Carolinians were sleeping in the dirt, while they were in their tents, while they were in campers, while they were waking up every single day, drinking out of bottled water that was supplied to them by civilian volunteers and civilian aid relief efforts, we watched billions of dollars get sent overseas. We watched billions of dollars get stolen through corrupt actions within this country. And all that time, $60 billion of damage We lived it. We looked at it, and we were frustrated for the delay in federal support. In fact, we were even more frustrated at the politicization of that particular disaster, especially with the previous administration. And now it's all coming to light. I mean, look, the incumbent, so this is the craziest thing about this. The incumbent said on October 9th of 2024, when the disaster struck, that FEMA wasn't sending money to foreign aid and it wasn't sending money to support illegal aliens. The next day, on October 10th, FEMA came out and said that they had already spent 50% of their annual budget. They would have to reduce spending because they had already spent so much of their annual budget in the first 10 days of the new fiscal year. And then we found out that, I think in January or February, that there was an authorization of at least $85 million that was sent to New York in order to house illegal migrants and pay for them. So how is it that we are so disconnected from the reality both on the ground and at the federal level when it comes to how these dollars are moving and where they're going, that public statements would be made to an attempt to discredit volunteers on the ground, as well as to discredit the actual information that they're getting from local representatives and administrative personnel. And then I've gotten to a point where I've become very frustrated. And I'm frustrated because there has to be a change. And I'm tired of seeing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, so update us on the Western North Carolina response since the Trump administration took official control of the government. Have things started to move more quickly, or what's the status of what's going on?
We saw an uptick in debris removal operations early on. So there was a major slow rolling of the effort with regards to releasing funds when President Trump became president, was elected in, and finally took office in January of last year. We saw an uptick in those operations, and we saw money begin to flow, which is great. We know that at this point, there's been roughly $7 billion or so appropriated to North Carolina in order for disaster relief. And of that $7 billion, there's been a few $100 million that have been distributed throughout the endeavor, throughout the region, in the entirety of the area. And actually, it may be a little more than a few $100 million. This is the number one piece of feedback that I have gotten back from people on the ground. It's not enough. It's too slow. There's too much bureaucracy involved in the dollars moving, and it's not being moved effectively. I know that there was just $54 million released to the State Department of Transportation. The fact of the matter is that if not for the nonprofits on the ground, if not for civilian volunteers, then Western North Carolina was on the absolute verge of collapse under the destruction of Hurricane Helene. And in its ability to have immediate response, civilian volunteers did the lion's share of the effort in order to help their neighbors and their community. And that is a definitive definition of what American exceptionalism and the idea of rugged individualism and how it applies to the ability to be of greater service to your community.
Thank God that Mondami is restricted to the confines of New York City right now, the man that hates rugged individualism. So what I'm hearing is what I've suspected for quite a while is FEMA is still not adequately under the control of appropriate number of Trump political appointees that understand how to get this job fixed and get that organization running right. Is what I'm hearing.
I think the new acting director of FEMA, I think he has got a sound plan. I think he's got a very good direction in hand. I think that he is taking definitive efforts. And also, I think every Trump appointee that's operating at the highest levels of the government, they have such an uphill battle to climb when it comes to the embedded bureaucracy that's been established through 8 years of Obama and 4 years of Biden. And the establishment, we'll call it the establishment bureaucracy, that ultimately believes in slow rolling every effort, not moving with definitive purpose, not having defined outcomes and targets, and believing that there's an endless supply of money is a detriment to the American people.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not talking about the top two layers of appointees. I'm talking about layers 3, 4, and 5, and then getting into the civil service, which had a lot of people hired under the Obama years, and then more under the Biden years, in the career civil service that are actively resisting and disrupting the president's policies. We know that continues to happen because we see the frustrations and hear them from both citizens like you're talking to and the appointees at the top.
You know, in the military, we had evaluations, performance evaluations, NCOERs and OERs, officer evaluation reports and non-commissioned officer evaluation reports. And if you got so many negative NCOERs or OERs, you went before a review panel. And as an officer, 9 times out of 10, when it came up for your next opportunity to get your next rank, especially in the Army, you went before a review panel. And if you had a bunch of negative OERs, you probably didn't get promoted. And if you got passed over twice, there was a mandatory discharge. Why are we not doing the same thing for federal employees? Why are we not doing evaluation reports? Why are we not doing performance reports? Why are we not assigning KPIs, key performance indicators, for federal employees to hit on a regular basis? And if we're not hitting these KPIs, we're not actually performing the way we're supposed to, why aren't we firing them? Why do we believe, or why is there some belief at the federal level that bureaucratic employees are untouchable? I mean, we watched the challenge of firing DOD civilian personnel and government civilian personnel when we were in the military. It took an act of God. At some point, we have to change the policy by which we operate at the bureaucratic level. Mandatory term limits for congressmen and senators, mandatory retirement for bureaucrats, mandatory performance evaluations for federal employees. And if you have 3 strikes, then you have to go before a review board, and then you go on, I would say you have to go on a probationary period, and if you don't meet it, you're fired. At some point, we have to take these actions. Why do we celebrate mediocrity, Rob? Why is this a thing that we choose to do?
It's amazing. I don't know, but like in political elections, we have over a 95% incumbent reelection rate, but everybody's complaining about their lack of competence. We got to take one more break at it. When we come back, we'll see a little clip about the protests against ICE in Asheville, North Carolina, right there. I think that's in District 11. We'll be right back with Adam Smith.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Liberation! Down, down with deportation! Down, down with deportation! Up, up with liberation! Up with liberation! Down, down with deportation! Down, down with deportation! Up with liberation!
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday here on Worldview Tube on this show, and we're talking with congressional candidate for North Carolina's District 11, U.S. Army Special Operations Forces veteran and community activist Adam Smith. And Adam had to show that clip in the show because that's one of the protests in Asheville, North Carolina, over the last few days, protesting against ICE. Now, have there been any large deportation operations inside Western North Carolina with ICE conducting them?
There's not been anything large. There's been some operations, but nothing substantial in general. I find it ironic in that video, I don't know if you saw, but I find it ironic in that video that the Party of Peace and those who believe themselves to be above the concept of violence are protesting while also carrying an effigy of a guillotine. I mean, that's really, really ironic.
Yeah, the media even today will make a big deal out of the miniature gallows that was on the Washington Mall during the January 6, 2021 protest, and continue to do that today. But they never talk about the guillotines. And in the Summer of Love, the BLM protest in New Orleans, they actually did bring a real guillotine to that. There were like 10,000 people in Jackson Square there, and the media never reported on that. And the guillotine seems to be the favored tool to execute Americans who still believe in the Declaration of Independence if these guys get the opportunity. And that's what I really wanted to talk about. We touched on it earlier in the show. Look, I've worked in intelligence at the higher levels. So I understand what kind of capabilities our country has for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Done a lot of work at the enlisted level in bomb disposal, so I understand the needs of intelligence for things like counterinsurgency operations. And I believe that these protests are the biggest symptom of a formal insurgency against the United States of America by the left and the Islamists, probably the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party members that were able to get here by the tens of thousands under the Biden administration illegally, and that it is an actual insurgency operation. And from a counterinsurgency perspective, I've recommended in the last few days on air that the United States president, the commander-in-chief, direct our intelligence assets at our own country to collect on these networks, because they're all firing right now constantly. Their comms networks, their command and control networks, their financial networks, their logistics networks, their personnel staffing networks. They're all firing on a 24/7 basis to fuel these protests. I mean, where do you think the pre-printed signs and the national talking points come from? They're coming out of this network, and Antifa is a big part of it. And the president's designated Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization. So the authorities should be there. Why aren't we doing it?
That is a really good question. You know, I saw that you had a multitude of interviews recently, or at least in the past few months, with a good friend of ours, Chad. And he was in Oregon, and he was covering the Antifa protests in Oregon that were not nonviolent. And if we talk about the definition of nonviolent, nonviolent resistance is a thing that we've celebrated in the United States for a very, very long time. We watched it during the Civil Rights Movement. It's something that is effective. However, we've gone so far beyond nonviolent resistance when it comes to protests. It's outright chaos and anarchy, and it's a definitive attempt to destroy the institutions that this country operates and was founded upon. You're not wrong. If Antifa has been declared a domestic terror organization, why aren't we taking further action to dismantle Antifa? We watched a thwarted terror attempt with regards to members of Antifa, but I think it's a trans-Tifa, that's what they're calling it, trans-Tifa organization out west. We just watched an Islamist get arrested in North Carolina for an attempted terror attack. ICE protests. And at these ICE protests, what do we see? We see people wearing kufiyas. We see people, carrying their gay pride signs and all the. At some point, the left has to get on the same page with what we're actually protesting. Are we protesting ICE and immigration, or are we protesting the fact that we're deporting voters? Are we protesting the fact that we're eliminating your army of insurrectionists in the United States? What are we protesting? Because if it's just whatever the thing that makes you feel the best about being incensed about that day, then I think we need to probably have a conversation about mental health and less of a conversation about ineffective or inefficient leadership in the United States.
Yeah, I think that's the Bolshevikism that you see, is that it's not about what they're protesting, really. It's about wielding power through the masses in a highly organized, highly resourced, and highly trained way. I mean, I didn't use this clip in the show, but as I was researching for this episode, I did come across a clip in a North Carolina church where Antifa trainers are teaching these protesters how to interact the best way to get on video and to actually be violent.
Do you have that?
I mean, it may be minor violence they're teaching in those cases, but they were actually teaching them that. And unfortunately, a lot of those trainers are ex-military guys.
Yeah, you're right. And I've seen that video as well. It's an interesting video, but the crazy part about it, and I know people realize this, that's the same stuff that we do in the U.S. Army Special Forces overseas. We embed with insurgent operatives. We train, advise, and assist them as a counter force against tyrannical governments who are violent and oftentimes conduct horrible crimes against the people. And we're watching Antifa, we're watching insurgent operations take place real time in the United States, funded with a quite high level or quite high degree of success and capability right now. They amassed protests across the United States utilizing pre-positioned signs, prepaid for signs with unified messaging 24 hours after Maduro was captured. So an entire people that chanted no kings, then chanted for the release of a legitimate tyrannical dictator who was actively executing his people, all because it was an opportunity for the left to seize upon a potential talking point that could demonize President Trump and any conservative that supports him.
Yeah, it's really puzzling for a lot of folks because they don't really understand what they're seeing, and that's why I brought up the veterans that are doing this training in the Antifa organizations. They're using our handbooks. They're our brothers that are using our handbooks to do what you said we do to help fight against tyrannical and abusive and murderous governments. They're using our own handbooks and tactics and strategies in an attempt to get half the population to overthrow the United States government. And the United States government, look, even Joe Biden, people had to say eventually that he was the commander-in-chief and the president of the United States because he was sworn in. Whether he stole the election or not was not an issue once he was sworn in. And this president was duly elected. We know that the election was valid. There were enough observers on our side and enough observers on the other side to prove it. They all conceded relatively easily on the left. So he's duly elected. The Congress is duly elected. And it's a Republican Congress, so the Republican Party has all three branches, the two elected branches of government, and the majority of the folks on the Supreme Court are supposedly not Republicans necessarily, but honor the Constitution and the Declaration that underpins it is the way most of them decide, and even some of the leftist judges still do that. We've seen 9-0 judgments come out in the last 6 months. But my point with all that, though, Adam, is that we're using good tactics, good training that we've used to great effect to free people, and these folks are trying to institute a tyrannical government controlled by one party, which is made up of Islamists and communists. I'm going to say it and go right there because democratic socialism is communism. I don't care what form you want to call it or what words you want to use. And Islamism is connected with that communism and Marxism. And Mondami in New York City is living proof that you can get Americans to vote for somebody that is both of those persuasions. And you've seen by what he said and the actions he's taken so far, that's exactly what he's going to try to do. And it may seem soft now, but at some point it's going to get hard. And these demonstrations, these protests, this organization that's behind it, that's the thing. It's the revolution. And the revolution to destroy the America that's celebrating its 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence will be gone if we don't intercept this.
You're not wrong. And it's interesting. I've had a lot of conversations, and I've been criticized about having, quote, decisive language or just, quote, parroting Republican talking points. Mm-hmm. I want to be really, really specific on some stuff. The first thing is this. I'm loyal to the Constitution and the American people and my family and my God. And it goes God, family, Constitution, and the American people in that order. And in that order, my loyalty will hold, because being loyal to a party or loyal to a man makes you just as much as a despot as the individual who seeks that loyalty. That's the first thing. The second thing is this, and I want to be super clear on this as well. The American people in general have to pick a side. They have to choose between American exceptionalism, constitutional originalism, an understanding of civic education, or they have to choose the other side, which is human secularism, the idea that the individual is the greatest and most highest form of authority in all of the universe versus God. And if we don't identify that there is a side to pick on this, then we will fail and falter as a country. I mean, the founding fathers even said it. John Adams specifically said that the Constitution is for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Why did he say that? George Washington referenced a common foundation, a common religion, and a common people that built this country, because there was founding principles that we could all agree upon. And not even if we disagreed on the process by which we got to the desired end state, we agreed that the foundational principles were the same. And the American people are going to have to pick a side. And true conservatives are going to have to stop abdicating their voice. They're going to have to stop sitting on the sidelines and hope that someone else fixes the problem. They're going to have to stop asking the federal government and politics, how are you going to fix this problem? And they're going to have to start getting real active, real quick, and verbal about their position, and activate a base of people that agree with it. We have to change. Absolutely right.
Well, folks, this is Adam Smith from North Carolina District 11. Go support him. Volunteer to help his campaign. Throw him $5. Throw him $1,000. It takes money, and not as much money, but it takes money and resources to do it. Thanks, Adam, for coming on and giving us an update and talking about these critically important issues. Tomorrow is Truth Thursday, and my friend Scott Adams, the Dilbert cartoon author and great American, passed away this morning, and we'll talk about that tomorrow right here on Worldview Tube.